So we're ready to start our block B4, C8, F3, and G7. So here's a look at our finished block. The supplies you'll need: if you're doing wool, you'll need your optional wool. You'll need your triangle of fabric 1, triangle of fabric 2. You'll need a strip of fabric 4. You'll need your sections 1 and 2 that you previously made on your cutaway stabilizer. And if you're doing your optional pieced back, you'll need that as well. You'll need your thread A with a bobbin, thread B with a bobbin, thread E with a bobbin, thread F with a bobbin, your accent thread with a bobbin, and water soluble. Let's get started. I've gone ahead and stitched step 1, which was the placement stitch on the battleizer, and then step 2, which was putting my wool batting down, which you can skip if you're not using your wool batting. And I've done step 3, which is continuing with your water soluble thread, and it stitches placement stitches on top of your batting. So step 4 is to take a triangle of fabric 1 and place it in this upper corner. So I will carefully make sure I have at least a 1/4 inch extending past this basting line on my fabric and about a 1/2 inch on the outside edge. And I'll continue with my water soluble thread and tack down fabric 1. So here's step 4 with the water soluble thread. So next I need to trim this little corner off here. I'm going to leave about a scant 1/4 inch. And for step 5, we need to take fabric 4 and we need to place it right side to fabric 1. So right sides together. So it'll go about like this, and we'll switch to a neutral thread in the needle and stitch the seam. So here's my seam. Step 6, we'll flip fabric 4 right side up, smooth it out. We'll change our needle thread to water soluble and stitch the tack down for fabric 4. So next we need to trim our fabric 4, so I'm going to trim it right here, leave about a scant 1/4 inch. And I have a little bit more here than I need, so I'm going to trim that as well. And I can leave this outside edge for later when I trim the whole block up. So our next step is step 7, and for step 7 we'll take fabric 2, right side to fabric 4. We'll put neutral thread in the needle, stitch the seam, and then it will flip out. For step 8, we'll flip the fabric right side up. We'll change our thread to water soluble and stitch a tack down. So we can go ahead and trim this section, leaving about a scant 1/4 inch. I won't worry about the outside edge till the end. Now we're ready for steps 9, 10, and 11, which are match points for section 1. So here's a look at our section 1 that we made earlier, and when we flip it over, you can see the little bit of gray thread that's there, and that's what I'm going to use for my match point. So I will put section 1 right side to the last piece section, and when I lower my needle, I'm aiming for that match point, that little spot of gray thread. And that's how I know that's where I'll line up my piece. So once I get it lined up, I can go ahead and stitch 9. And then we'll move on to 10. Same idea, there's a little bit of gray thread there. So I will lower my needle right where that gray thread comes in, stitch that match point. And then the last step is the corner. And again, I'll just lower the needle to line up my section. This is just to get it straight. Now we're ready for step 12, which is the seam. So step 12 is the seam to stitch down section 1. I'm going to slow my machine down And the first thing I want to do is again lower my needle and align my needle with the seam line or the basting line on section 1. Once I get that lined up, I can go ahead and start stitching. And all I really need to do is nothing. Actually, I'm just going to slow the machine down and let it stitch the seam because it's already tacked. So now we're ready for step 13 and 14, which is match points for section 1 once we turn it right side up. So I've switched back to my water-soluble thread because now we're going to flip section 1 right side up and we're going to smooth it out nice and flat. We'll lower the needle, and the goal is to get the needle to go right where that seam line intersects. That's our match point. So once we get it there, we let it stitch. And the next one is step 14, which is the same thing on the other side. So again, we just smooth it out flat, lower the needle, align the needle with the seam, and then let that stitch. So once we get our steps 13 and 14, our match points placed, it's ready for 15, and we're going to continue with our water-soluble thread. And actually all we need to do is start out by lowering your needle and just aligning your match point and slowing the machine down and letting it stitch. And my job is to just keep this fabric flat as it goes. And this is just a tack down for section 1. So now we're ready to do the match points for section 2. So time to do the match points for section 2, and we're going to do the same thing. We'll turn it over, look for our little match point from our darker thread, and we'll just lower the needle right where that needs to go. Right there. This is step 16. We'll let that tack. Then we'll move over to step 17. Same thing. Lower that needle right where I see that little dab of gray thread. And step 18 is the last part of it. So I'm going to line up my seam line and let that stitch. So before we go ahead and stitch step 19, which is the actual seam for section 2, we're going to flip it over and just check our match points. And I've got a really good match there. I've got a good match here and at the end. So I'm happy with that. So I'll put it back right sides together, put neutral thread in my needle, and we'll stitch step 19, which is your seam. So just like the last section, before we stitch the seam, we're going to lower our needle, make sure that our needle aligns with the basting stitch from section 2, and we'll go ahead and make sure the machine is slow as well, and just let it stitch the seam. My seam is stitched. I'll flip it right side up, smooth it out, put water-soluble thread in my needle, and let it tack down section 2. Step 21, we're going to place thread in the needle only and stitch the hunter star. Step 22, we're going to place the back with fabric 1 on the bottom and fabric 2 in the upper left, fabric 1 in the bottom right, and we'll do water soluble thread in the needle only and tack the back down. So this is step 23, where we put thread A in the needle and the bobbin, and we stitch the quilting here and here. Step 24, we're going to put our accent thread in the needle and the bobbin, and it'll stitch the quilting right here. Step 25, we're going to put thread E in the needle and the bobbin and stitch the square. Step 26, place thread F in the needle and the bobbin and stitch the second decorative square. The final step, step 27, we'll put thread B in the needle and the bobbin, and it'll stitch a quilting line around the hunter star.